Sarah Pevehouse, welcome to the show. You have a background in education. You have an education in education. So, how did you break out of that matrix and start a micro high school project based learning, mixed age alternative institution?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. So I think really my journey began whenever I was seeking out alternative education for my own family. And so I entered into Waldorf education, which is a niche type education that most people don't know about, but it's been around for over 100 years, imported from Germany. Rudolf Steiner was the founder of that. And so I like to tell people, much like Maria Montessori created, an alternative education, Rudolf Steiner, created an alternative education. And so in 2015, my family and I were trying to figure out what kind of schooling our children would experience. And I just knew from when I was in college and I was subbing in public schools that education had wildly changed, even just since I was a kid. So I'm 43 and went through the public school system, and I realized then a lot had changed, and I was not really willing to sacrifice my children to it, and so we found Waldorf education, which is a beautiful journey for us, and then. Most commonly, these schools are K through 8. It's really getting hard to find a high school that is Waldorf education. And then within that, I think we all know that through the time period of COVID, there was a sort of another thing that was happening, which was sort of another kind of movement within education was happening. And a lot of schools were adopting DEI and different types of things that were kind of like finding their way into the teacher trainings and into the curriculum in the schools. And it happened to Waldorf too. So they kind of got usurped into this modern progressive agenda. And so we exited as a family from Waldorf education, and I was looking around locally of like what kind of high school I'd want to put my child in. And I really wasn't finding a program that I thought would really prepare her for life, for adulthood, for independent living outside of the home with us. And so I decided to create my own program that I thought would really check a lot of boxes, around life skills, character development, and also mentorship directly from people who are living in their zone of genius. And that's, the tacit knowledge that you gain from somebody who's just done something for years and perfected their craft, you cannot get from a textbook or a YouTube video. And so I started to create a program, and then some friends of mine locally here in Texas said, hey, have you heard about Tim Kennedy's program? And at the time, I'd kind of heard about it, but honestly, he was almost an hour drive away from us, so I really didn't pay much attention because I thought that's not an option for me. And then when I found out that him and Matt Bodrow had partnered to create an affiliate opportunity for other people to join in on sort of the foundational philosophical elements of what they're doing, I took a deeper look. And then that's when I decided that instead of going it alone, I thought it would be better to be a part of a like-minded community of people who were wanting to do education differently. And so I took the leap of faith and jumped in on the affiliate opportunity in the first round.
That's awesome. So cool. So you've been doing this for how long then?
We are just now into our second school year. So last year was my first school year, and now this 25-26 school year is year number 2.
Cool. Great. So a couple things I wanted to pick at from your opening statement there. I noticed that you were talking about preparation, and you said preparation for life, like adult life. And what I was thinking is probably one of the reasons that Montessori is very, very young. Like it doesn't go much past kindergarten in my experience. And then you said Waldorf to 8th grade, but not many Waldorf high schools, even if they were still aligned with your views. So then one of the reasons that I could come up with off the top of my head is because high school is this big preparation for college. But that's not what you said you wanted your kids to be prepared for. Not that college is all bad, but what is it that your Apogee school helps kids with to prepare them for life rather than and I don't want to oppose it because I think some people might think like, oh, that's a cool school for people who don't care about, careers or, success or doing well in life. But none of that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, how does your school prepare your kids for success in the real world?
That's a great question. So what we look at is the well-roundedness of a human being, right? So I'm looking at, I'll just give you an idea of, so we always are doing book studies. We're reading good, quality literature. We're hosting book discussions every week. That's kind of like an underlying thing that's running throughout. We do a thing called Mindset Monday, and so it's there's a prompt on the board every Monday, and usually it's kind of within the theme we're working in, and it's a quote from somebody famous along with a journaling prompt. And they put their thoughts on a Post-it note, really. So it's written on a dry erase board, and they answer and put their Post-it note up next to it. So those things, we're just trying to pull from them, develop their thinking skills all the time, but also growth mindset, right? So understanding that we are working always towards being a little bit better than we were the day before. So we talk about striving for personal excellence. And within that, we, again, trying to see the world as a really interesting place. Like, we want kids who are curious and who really have a passion in their heart for learning new things. And I can say that we enter into things with a theme. So the theme guides us, right? Right now we're in a medieval theme. And the idea is that we're actually studying what was it like to live during the Middle Ages through the lens of roles in society. And it's really getting them to think about the contrast between then and now, right? So that builds in not just a muscle for discernment, but also gratitude and appreciation for the way we have life right now, which is really pretty good, right? When you think about back then. And also fairness and justice and all of these things that society has had to grapple with for a really, really long time. But also doing life together as a community, right? So we are studying the guilds and the artisans and all of those things. So we're always looking at the deeper meaning behind something that we're studying, as well as the practical elements. So what I show them is we'll look at something, I'll introduce a concept, and then we will look at it through like a video. We use the great courses a lot, sometimes TEDx or something like that. And then we go and do it. So like, for example, one of the students is studying the role of a blacksmith in the Middle Ages. So we, of course, looked at learning about metallurgy, which is like how do they get these raw materials hot and malleable, and then we actually went to a local blacksmithing shop and did a blacksmithing workshop where we worked with a forge with a 2,500 degree forge, and they were melting rebar, softening the rebar, and then we had to hammer it out. And then they had a bladesmith there who, once we had shaped our knives, basically, then he did the final bladesmithing to it to actually give it a blade, and really curated it to the shape that the student had created. And so everybody's knife turned out unique and different. And so that's sort of the process that we do. Everything is like concept to reality, like what does this look like in the real world, but then also a philosophical element of like, as we are shaping this metal and doing this hard work, how is it shaping us, right? How are we shaping ourselves by sort of like chipping away and hammering away at ourselves every day. And so anyway, we try to look at the person as a whole human. And then there's this really practical element too of just like, studying something, learning how to do good research, right? Going a little deeper, because a lot of times they start with what's most obvious, like just a Google search, right? But then I'm like, hey, you need to go to the library. You need to find a book, a primary source of information for this. I want you to interview someone who does this, and just to kind of show them that learning can be multifaceted. And that is something that's going to help them in their life later, instead of just taking something at face value, a quick Google search for the answer, but showing them how to go a little deeper, a couple steps in, and doing quality research, which is really helping people to discern, things for themselves.
So your school is mixed age, and what does that mean? And then what does a day look like in a mixed age project-based school?
Yeah, so mixed age just means it's kind of like taking it back to a one-room schoolhouse, and we're all just in it together, right? So there's a blend of 9th grade through 12th grade, and we're learning these themes, but everybody's working through it at a different level. So my expectation for the seniors is going to be a little different than the freshmen, especially the freshmen are just learning about, MLA formatting and how to do good research and all of that. And the seniors have been through that, especially my second year students who were with me last year. So the depth of their work is going to look a little different, as well as the expectations of their delivery. And then project-based learning is really where we get to kind of chop something down into its pieces and work with it in different ways. So it's not, we don't do tests and things like that. So really it's about the mastery of the material. And we, in that, I say they have to show their work. So at the end of a session, which a session is usually about 6 weeks long, we do a student showcase. And those are about 2 hours. It's a pretty well orchestrated event that the students actually run. And I'm just kind of the MC, if you will. So I do the intro, I welcome everybody, but then the students take turns getting on stage. We have a stage here. We sublease space inside of a church, so we use their old sanctuary, and we have lights and microphones and the whole thing. It's a really elaborate production. They have to do a slideshow, so they get up on stage, they do an oral presentation. It's usually, since now we have more students. Last year we started with just 3 students, so each student got to do like a 15-minute presentation, and now we've got 9 students, so we'll have to whittle that down. It's going to be more like a 5 to 8 minute presentation for everybody, but they do an oral presentation with a slideshow showing their research, and then they also have a table display. So in the end, it's a really thoroughly articulated presentation. And then the audience, we usually have about 60 people that show up, and so it's a mix of like family, but also community members and local homeschoolers that are genuinely just curious about what we're learning. And then the people get to visit at their tables after everybody gets their turn doing their presentation. And so I tell them, we can only fit so much into the oral part, but your table display is where you can really flex and like show everything that you've learned, all your resources too, right? So that knife that they made is going to be on display, and they're going to get to tell about that whole process to anybody who wants to know about it, any books they used, and then of course their specific topic that they researched will be fleshed out there more. And like sometimes that looks like, I've had students do reproductions of things. So we had a student last year who studied medieval medicine, actually, when we studied this time period last year. And she had reproductions of like little apothecary bottles and, herbs and like what a doctor would have used as medicine back then, and tools, how did they do surgeries and that kind of stuff. And so anyway, so that's kind of how they show their work. And so we're looking for mastery of the material and comprehension, right? Can you explain to somebody what is the thing that you researched and you learned about, more than I'm looking for them to take a test and regurgitate, certain facts to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Question on homework. Do you assign any homework? And if not, do you find that the kids are still participating in their projects off hours?
Yeah, so I try not to assign homework, and that's really because I want to honor my true mission, which is to prepare them for real life. And the truth is that if you're working 40 hours a week, it's very unlikely your boss is giving you homework, right? Like most people, unless you just aren't getting your work done on time, you've got a deadline, and you've got to, it kind of falls over into other hours, which is what happens here. There are times when our schedule's busy. We're doing field trips. We have, we do jujitsu twice a week, CrossFit twice a week. We have a private chef that comes in and teaches them culinary skills for 3 hours on Friday. So there are times when our week is very busy and they haven't had a lot of in-class time to work on their slideshow or their oral presentation. And yeah, I have found students, I have a couple students who actually give themselves homework because they're enjoying the topic so much and they're enjoying the research. But overall, I really try to tell people, look, I think your home life should be for hobbies and family and your personal interest. I don't really want it to be consumed by schoolwork, but if you aren't getting your work done, then you've got to figure it out. Like that's just part of time management and project management and delivering something, right? Getting your deliverable to its deadline on time. And so there are some kids, even my own daughter is in this program, and there's times when she's at home hammering away at her table display, getting it ready, all of that. So it really just depends on their ability to manage their time, but also part of our model is using the community as a classroom. And so they're genuinely, sometimes we're just busy going out and about, and there's not a lot of class time to get it done.
Yeah, that makes sense. How many of those, you may have said this, but I missed it. How many of those project presentation days do you have throughout the school year?
So this year we're going to have 5. Last year we had 6. And it's because the break between Thanksgiving and Christmas is like 3 weeks long, and we made it a 3-week session. And afterwards, reflectively, the students were like, that was too intense. 3 weeks was not long enough to really do thorough, research, but also then prepare to like show our work. And so this year, what we've decided to do is to make the break, the 3 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then when you come back from Christmas until the next break, New Year, that big break you get through New Year's, we decided to make those 3-week chunks a 1 6-week thing. And so now we're going to have five showcases throughout the year. But that's just, I take the feedback from the students. I really want them to feel like they are a part of it, that they have agency and autonomy within this program. And so I seek their feedback. And ultimately, there are times when I'll say, I hear what you're saying. We're going to keep this the same though, or, whatnot, depending on what the topic area is. But then there are other times when I'm like, how was that for you? Let me know. And, obviously I don't want them under stress, sometimes it's good to push through something that's stressful, but then there's other times when it's not productive. And so that was basically the feedback, is like, we don't feel like we did good work, having only 3 weeks. And so we've made that change this year.
It sounds really cool, those presentations, sort of like a TEDx sort of presentation that a kid gets to learn how to do for that oral presentation aspect of it. But then having the tables, it feels like South by Southwest or something like that, where these people have their passion for the past, however many weeks. And it just seems really rewarding, where I always try to ask, like, I've got nieces and nephews that go to public school or a private school, but still very traditional format for their private school. And they're younger, but like, there's nothing, they don't have anything to say. Like, what was your favorite part of the day today or whatever? And it's usually something social or something food based, but so it just seems like this is very legitimizing for the time that's being spent. Even what you just said about being productive, like, I don't know that many people that are participating in a school system have this idea that it's sort of productive. There's like an assumption that it's obligatory. I have to do this and I have to meet a deadline or whatever. But the idea that it would be productive, it seems a bit foreign. So in your mind, what exactly are you and your students attempting to produce?
That's a really great question. I appreciate you looking at it through that lens of the juxtaposition between, the product, right? Of like, what are you getting out of this? And I will say for our students, they're because there's an element of learning about it sort of in a 2D way, if you will, like on paper or through a video, and then getting out into the real world, into, hands-on learning, that definitely locks it into their long-term memory way better. And I've found already that this year, as we're moving through our first 6-week session, that my returning students are already reflecting back into the time that we studied the Middle Ages before, but through a different approach. And they're pulling from that to help them in their research now. And so there really is something to this, like getting out into the world and learning from people and going to museums and, whatever that looks like, looking at real artifacts of something versus just this sort of concept of, it's very abstract, when it's on paper, and you just have to rely on, your senses are limited, right? And how you're experiencing something when you're doing it that way. And so, what I love is, so I'd like to explain that, as I've mentioned, we do themes. And last year we did start out with a theme that was in the Middle Ages, but we looked at it more broadly since we only had 3 students. I just said, if you're going to do a comparative analysis, which is how we were approaching it, between that time period and this time period, what do you think, what are your topic areas, right? And so they made a list of like 7 topic areas. And then I had them outline them from most interesting to least interesting, and then they compared their lists, and nobody had a matching number 1. So there was no competition in, I want to research this, but you do too, how do we sort that out? So everybody picked something different. So one person picked medieval medicine, one picked medieval societal structures, and another picked medieval architecture. And so the challenge when you do a comparative analysis essentially is that you are looking at doing 2 concurrent research projects, right? And so that's how we looked at the time period then. And really the underlying goal actually was that we were looking at writing a class code, a social agreement for the kids. And we actually started to do a deep dive into a night, like there were nights, right? There was this idea of like nights and how they work together, and having a personal code, but then integrating that into a group, and how do you work together as a group while honoring your own personal values, but having to work together with others and having shared values. And so we interviewed veterans. We had a Vietnam veteran come in. We had a more recent veteran who worked for the Secret Service and did Homeland Security and things like that. And he came in and was interviewed by them. And so we were trying to just weave together kind of this tapestry of this idea of that, people used to, number one, society worked with their hands. Literally every job was manual. There were, even when they had what was considered technology back then, which was coming through in the late Middle Ages, 14th and 15th century, where they were perfecting like the plow, and the printing press came about and things like that. Everything was still really manual and by hand. And so now we're looking at it again through this lens of roles in society, and what did it mean to be a contributing member of society back then. And we talk about it now too, of like, what do you think contribution in society looks like today? How has it changed, from then to now? Because used to, people lived in smaller communities and they shared resources, and now the world has become wildly independent, right? Like everyone is like so independent that they don't even know their neighbors sometimes. But it's because they're just Amazon ordering everything, and whatever. Like the world is shaped by conveniences. And so anyway, all of that is to say, I think I've kind of gotten off from what your question was, but just to show that like the learning is, there's so many opportunities to engage these kids beyond paper and pencil. Or really, honestly, if I'm just be really blunt, I've had 2 kids that came to me this year straight from public school. One is a 10th grader and one's a 9th grader. And they've been doing online learning for so long that the first time I asked them to write a thank you note. So anytime we do our school tour somewhere or have someone come in and do a presentation for us, we write them a thank you note and tell them like why it mattered that we learned from them. These 2 students didn't even know how to write on the paper. So they didn't know which way the paper should be oriented to, what I'm saying? Like where the 3 hole punches on one side, they wrote on the page backwards, and they didn't understand how to orient their own paper. And they didn't understand basic punctuation. Like they didn't even capitalize their own names. Which was shocking to me, right? And so, I guess I can say like, well, if they were using a computer, right, it would have done that for them. But that's my point, is that we're losing something really important here. And that's the most basic things, these soft skills that kids really do need, which is number one, how do you say, do you say thank you? Right? And the point is that I tell them like our gratitude to someone else is actually a gift to them. It's telling them that they matter, their work mattered, their time mattered. And that's really important. And then it's not just that. It's not just saying the words, those 2 words of thank you, but it's, can you actually articulate why it mattered and what you learned from them? And then also just, do you even know how to use these basic tools, like a piece of paper? And so...
Yeah, a piece of paper is a pretty rudimentary technology. The thing that was occurring to me is that you talked about Amazon ordering and not knowing your neighbors. That's one example. Not knowing like the people that are providing you the goods that you need for the life that you want to live. And we're just very disconnected in that way from the hands-on life that, just like fundamentally, we have hands. It's like you could submit yourself to a virtual reality, in a couple years that you don't necessarily have to use your hands or touch anything, and it's all whatever that would be. It's sort of sensation, but not actual hands-on tactile interaction with the world. But it just seems to me like there are so many things that we can't account for in virtual interaction, so to speak, because a thank you note is not something that would be on the list of priorities, right? You wouldn't put that on the list. Your school does, but I'm just saying like net consequences. I don't think it would make the top 20. So then
right.
The reality though is that a thank you note is something that is really getting at the root of your relationship with the person who's giving of themselves to you, the resources that they've accrued. And so this sort of exchange and collaboration that is necessary for society is just being lost to the point where a piece of paper is a confusing technology, but at its core it's really like your own body becomes a confusing technology. Like you have been given the ability to, think and speak and act, and yet you don't recognize that just something very simple and is so exponentially valuable to be able to recognize what someone else is doing for you. Because I would assume that when you order on Amazon, you minimize, you don't thank you Amazon for shipping my order to me. There's none of that. There's no human interaction through that. So these kids just literally have never had an opportunity to like see that taking place and then emulate it in their own life.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily think anything's missing, and it's so sad to think about, like, these people in real life, but just to imagine them and think like they they are becoming disincentivized from treating other people the way that they want to be treated, because there's no reciprocity. Like they
Mm-hmm.
don't expect to be reciprocated for what they contribute to the world. So then you were talking earlier about
Well, and it's
being a
all
contributing member.
relationship, right? And so if we think about it, really, like, it all comes down to relationship and how we're being, what's being modeled for us, but also what are we being told is important. And what I try to imbue on my students is that, like, if you want to be a competent, successful person, you have to understand how to manage relationships in your life, right? Not just with yourself, because a lot of us don't even know that most basic thing about how to have a healthy relationship with ourselves, not to mention spirituality and those kinds of things, which is really the foundation of it. And that might look different for every family. And I'm a Christian. But my program is not faith-based, but it definitely, I try to bring to the forefront of their minds of, like, having some sort of gratitude practice or a prayer practice. I just said it's going to look different for everybody. But the truth is, the data does not lie that people who have some sort of practice around gratitude, mindfulness, or spiritual relationship in their life have better outcomes, better mental health outcomes, but also better relationships in the world. And so what I try to tell them is that, like, everything comes down to good communication, right? So, and relationships are the root of society. Like, this is just all, can we have healthy, good relationships with one another? Can we navigate conflict in a healthy way? And also, where can we take ownership of our own stuff? What are we bringing to that relationship or to the interaction in any way? And that's the first thing that I ask them is, like, what can you own in this? And then, of course, that, like you were saying, reciprocity, right, is so important. And so, anyway, I just want to mention that is, to me, of just a most basic element of raising these young people to be good humans in the world, is that being more cognizant of all it's just such the interwoven connection of all of us together. And if we aren't just doing those most basic things, which is just giving appreciation to another person who shared their knowledge with us, right? We went somewhere, we gained knowledge from something, for someone, who's really studied something. I mean, just this week, we went to a living history farm to learn about, there was a textile demonstration that they did about taking wool and cotton from a raw material and spinning it on a spinning wheel to make yarn, and then on and on from there, where those things went. And then also we did a tour of the Harry Ransom Center in Austin, which is like they have I don't even know how many artifacts they have. So it's a lot of digital things that they've digitized, but it's also paper artifacts. They have we went to see the Gutenberg Bible, which was produced in the 1400s with the Gutenberg printing press. And so anyway, we do a lot of things. Like, we get out into the world and we see these things and we learn from people who are genuinely passionate about that thing, right? And they're sharing their knowledge with us. And I want to mention one thing, something you touched on just a little bit ago. I wanted to share, there's a book that I think is really important that people should pay attention to. And it really influenced the way that I was looking at developing my program. And it's called Building Thinking Classrooms. And this book really didn't get noticed when it got published, because it came out, unfortunately, right as COVID was happening, right as the sort of all this stuff was sweeping across the news and just, like, taking everyone's attention. This book got released. And it just, like I said, it went under the radar totally within the education world. And just now, I think it was in 2024, this gentleman really started actually getting to get on podcasting, touring around and answering questions about his book. But he spent over 15 years He actually started it was a PhD project for him, his dissertation, and he got into K through 12 classrooms, and he spent lots of time. He went through every grade level and went through different schools for each grade level. So he really spread himself around, and he's from Canada, but he toured around and got into classrooms all over the place. And he ended up having a team of people help him with this research because he ended up becoming a much bigger project than he initially thought it was going to be. And what he found at the end, it would be distilled down to this element. I heard him say this on an interview, is that what he found was that there was no thinking happening in classrooms. And this was public school. And he said, he's like, but hear me. He's like, this is not a disparagement to teachers. He's like, they're working hard. There's a lot of things happening in classrooms, right? Like the teachers are, there's a lot of movement, a lot of things happening. But he said, unfortunately, what we observed, and mainly he focused initially just in math classrooms. And he said, hey, the teacher writes the thing on the board. The students work it out on their page, and just the thing is there's a lot of mimicry happening. That's what they found. And so in the end, ultimately when the teacher would show them, hey, this is how you solve this problem. Okay, now work on your own, and then we're going to review. The students had on average about 4 minutes to work independently, and then the teacher just gave them the answers. And so what these guys were observing as they were sitting in these rooms, and literally like a fly on the wall, like they did not interact with students or anything. They just sat and observed what was happening in a classroom through all these different grade levels. And so what they said was that some of these students develop really good strategies for looking busy, but really they're just waiting it out for the teacher to give them the answer. And then they just repeat and repeat and repeat that. And it essentially what Matt Bodro would say is that this becomes a game, right? And so there's some students who get really good at the game, and those are the kids that get rewarded and promoted and get accolades, and they, you know what I mean? And those are the valedictorians, the kids who can mimic and play the game really, really well, end up being really high on the achievement level within that system itself, right? But then you have kids that don't think that way. And those are the kids that find it boring, or they're the why kids. I was the why kid. I asked constantly, why? Why am I learning this? Why do I do it this way? Why does it matter, right? and I was infuriated in school most of the time, and I was annoying to my teachers because I was constantly distracting from them just getting through the lesson because I was asking so many questions. And so then you have these other kids, right, they get labeled as disruptive or as what's the oppositional defiant disorder, like that kind of stuff, which is just that's such a ridiculous label, right? Yeah. It's a kid they're pushing back, which is rightly so, because that's what I tell my kids, like, hey, I'm open to a dialogue on anything. So if you want to challenge me or push me back, and I'll challenge you too. Like sometimes I'm even going to say, hey, I want to reframe this for you, or I want to push on that a little more. And I'm okay if you do it back to me, because that's healthy dialogue. There's a kind way to say pretty much anything, right? If you really think about it. And delivery matters. And so anyhow, what I saw was that as I was reading this book, I'm like, wow, that is how I experienced school. There was a lot of mimicry, and the kids who could do that really well actually did succeed, right? And they were labeled as like high achievers. But in the end, what did they learn? They learned a pattern, right? They learned a pattern of behavior. And so what this guy said is that as they took this, so they got really curious and said, let's go into colleges. Let's go into freshman and sophomore year of college and see how these high achievers do. And what they found was that those methods, those strategies that got them through high school did not translate to college well at all. Because in college, you're expected to, the level of research and paper writing and dialogue with the professor is completely different from the experience of high school. And in public school specifically. And so they found that these kids who were high achievers fell off. I forget what they called it, but there was basically they fell off this success route that they were on, and often had to find new strategies, and that was really hard for them. So they identified, right, their identity was wrapped up in this high achievement, and then they get to this new learning environment and they're not successful anymore because those same strategies that made them successful there don't translate out. And that's true for the real world too. If you think about what does success look like when you get into get your first job, especially depending on what kind of work it is. But if you have deliverables and you don't know how to manage your time, and you don't know how to think creatively, and you don't know how to get work done without somebody prompting you constantly to get it done, that's going to be really hard. And I do find that in my classroom too, that when kids first get into my environment, everyone across the board. So last year I had 2 juniors and the rest were freshmen. And all of them equally lacked the same exact skill set, which was time management, project management, and self-leadership, emotional intelligence too. Like, how do I manage myself in all this freedom? And so anyway, I'll stop talking. That was a long little diatribe there, but I just wanted to mention it, that research, that book really fueled my desire to do things differently in my program.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like an incredible resource and just project by that guy. That's super cool. Um, I guess to go somewhere with what you were talking about, when a kid gets to college, I don't know if he talked about it in the book or if you have any experience with this through relationship or whatever, but uh, I was just thinking about the way that sometimes we can uh, theorize conspiratorially about the way that the system is perfectly designed to give us the result that we're getting. But when a lot of conservatives will struggle to send their kids to college or encourage that or say that that's a good idea because they're going to be corrupted and learn, some different ideologies that are not necessarily helpful or productive for society. So it's just strange to me to think of like kids being prepared all the way through high school for this college thing. We were just talking about how in the beginning, like your school is filling a niche in the market because most alternative schools can't sell people on the idea that they can prepare a kid for college, but so then the public schools have that covered. We're preparing them for college. And so when these kids learn this pattern recognition, I'm just going to say what they want me to say. I think Boudreaux spoke about uh, having that skill himself because he's obviously a
Mm-hmm.
smart guy, but he was able to abstract the principle like, okay, now they want me to do more research. Now they want me to be a little bit more self-directed, but the same principles apply. Have you found that to be the experience of any of the kids that you've met just through Apogee? Like, I don't know if you know any graduates that have gone on to college or anything like that, that they were a leg up on the people coming out of other institutions around them.
So I can't speak directly for graduates of Apogee because the program is still so young, but what I can say is just staying on top of educational research and data, and that more and more we're seeing that homeschoolers and kids who come from alternative education models are doing better in college, and even through college admissions. And I learned a little bit of this through Matt Boudreaux because he used to work in college admissions. But more and more colleges are creating a pathway for homeschoolers and alternative ed students to get into college because they're seeing that these are better students, right? They're more engaged, and the outcomes they're not dropping out at the same rates that other students are dropping out, and all of that. So the educational data is out there to show that there are higher GPAs. The graduation rates are higher for alternative ed and homeschool children, but it just has to do with engagement.
Yeah.
Like they just approach learning in a different way. And I see it here too. Like we have a part-time program now. We have 3 students that join us just 2 days a week, and there are some kids who just come in with that mentality of I just want to get done with I'm going to get done with my work as fast as I can, right? It's not about personal excellence. It's just about checking those boxes. And also there's something like we go to CrossFit too. And so one of my public school kids, I've just observed them in this way too, is that we go to CrossFit and they just want to be the fastest. And they don't care about form, like their form sucks and, all this, that they're not picking up they're not challenging themselves to pick up the heaviest weight they can, because they're looking around. They're like, I'm going to be first. And so we had to have a talk about that, and just to say like, hey guys, you're kind of sandbagging the workout a little bit, to be honest, and that doesn't make me trust you as a teammate, because if I see that I am suffering, I'm putting myself through personal suffering, and you are not, like we're not the same, and so I think that translates into the way they approach their learning as well.
I wanted to ask you about your relationship with your students' parents. It's something that I've heard Apogee people talk a lot about. And I know that Apogee has like mentorship programs for men and women, as well as young men and young women. And then obviously high school is sort of like a long form mentorship program for your students. So What does it look like for you? What are you looking for in parents? As a small school, I don't know how strict your selection process might be, but like, is there a selection process for people that you'd be willing to instruct their children?
Yeah, so I do have a strict process, and actually, that just comes from my background of working in education for so long. I would say broadly, the Apogee community really wants parents who are really looking at doing things differently, right? So they are just fed up if their kids were in public school, they've really reached that point of just like, okay, we've got to try something different. They're awake, right? They totally woke up to what's happening, and they realize that that system is not serving their child well or their family. And so, what I say is that it's nearly impossible to out influence your children, like to be the primary influencer of your children when they're spending 40 hours a week or more with other people with different beliefs than you. And so I feel like your community really, really matters. And that is something across the board in Apogee. We subscribe to that. You are the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? So we look at curating our communities with intention. And so, yes, Apogee, one thing I love about the Apogee network is that something that Matt Bodger and Tim Kennedy already had established was a Apogee Man program and a Young Men's program. And then now they've created a Apogee Women's program and a Young Women's program. So across the board, we're covered everywhere. And when people enroll into our schools, by them paying us tuition to be a part of this, we as affiliates get to enroll the mom, the dad, and the teen or the student, whoever's with us, in all of those programs individually. So it's not like, occasionally they will do a men's and women's group call or something like that, but typically they're run by individuals, so it's private. Also, like my daughter is enrolled in the Apogee Young Women's program, and she has a call at a different time than me, has a different cohort than me, and they run them with great intention. So there's a heavy focus on self-development, self-leadership, and emotional intelligence. They're reading books together. The Zoom calls that they do are usually to, maybe they'll have a guest presenter that's on the topic. Maybe it's the author of the book they read, but maybe it's just somebody who is aligned with that topic that they're learning about and can help to help them learn about it differently through the work that they do in the world. And then, of course, there's a live Q&A that's available too. So it's not just about, because you could watch YouTube videos and things like that, but to be on a call with someone and be able to raise your hand and ask them something and get that feedback immediately. Actually, my students and I were just discussing this the other day about our field trips, and I said, so isn't it cool, that not only do you get to take knowledge from someone to enhance what you're learning, but then you get to interact with them and ask them questions. You can't do that with a video, right? It's a one-way you're just receiving information. And so these programs are set up in a way that it creates that interactive opportunity, but also they use a platform where you have like your own channel, that you can discuss things, share resources, post pictures. It's really a community is what they're building. It's really a community. And so I love that, like, I'm in a group of affiliates, but I'm also in a group of women. And so some of these women are just homeschool moms, or they're just people who are on a path of self-development. And so we're all kind of pouring into each other in that regard. Like sometimes I show up and I've got questions, and sometimes I show up and I'm the one answering questions, and helping somebody out. And so that's kind of the beauty. My old boss, I used to work for a guy named John Vroman for a company called Front Row Dads. And he would say for his group, it was like a CEO men's group. And he would say, show up whether you're kicking ass or you're getting your ass kicked, because either way, you're going to get something out of it. And sometimes we do that. The thing that we get out of is that we helped pour into another person and contribute, to their development or to their perspective, or, because we're all on a different scale of experience. And so that's the one thing that I love about the mixed age learning environment, is that sometimes, right, somebody's a little further along the path, and it's not based on age, right? Sometimes it's just based on life experience and how much you get out and do things in the world. And so that's what I love. Another just benefit about being a part of this community is that we are sort of all kind of raising our hand to participate. We're here willingly. But also we've all agreed, like, things do need to change. We need to do things a little differently. And it's really up to parents. The truth is that even though I'm a teacher and I'm in a classroom with students, essentially the parents are my partners, and we are making an agreement to to help raise this young person up in the world.
It's really interesting the way that, like, school is sort of like uh, childcare. That's the way I would think of it for a lot of people. It obviously has this like overarching purpose of education, whatever that means in various institutions. But it effectively, in a country where there's plenty of people with only single parent households, that person needs to go and earn a wage, and then there's also plenty more with two parent households and they're both out of the house working. So it's sort of an essential um,
Hmm.
utility for our nation, the way that we've set up our economy. And so uh, with that, I think people feel maybe compelled towards just offloading this responsibility for the education of their children. I was listening in preparation for this to Matt Bodrow and Nick Bear talk about the responsibility of education being on the parent, and he was saying you already are the primary educator in your daughter's life. Like Nick had just had his daughter; she's 10 months old. He's like, you're already that person. So if you were to choose to send them off to somebody else, like that would be, it's still your responsibility that you're just giving to someone else. You're deputizing them to educate your child. So anyway, as far as it goes with the parents, like I spent a year in a Christian school as the high school science teacher, and I uh, I just, got to be part of the faculty, and everybody has their different approaches to teaching, but there was a lot of people that were just like always kind of fighting with the parents, like, this person needs to make sure that their kid's getting their homework done, or this person needs to tell their kid to behave, in class or whatever. It's always sort of like there's a bit of an opposition there, like, because you're sort of co-parenting with these people that pretty much entrust you with the responsibility of educating their kids. So it's just chaotic, I would say, to say the least. So in your school, um, what do you have PTA meetings? What does the relationship look like? Because you mentioned these are people that are awake. They're people that they know there's a problem. They want to be a part of the solution in their own child's life. And yeah, so how does that relationship work?
Yeah, so I will say that what I've seen a lot of the apogees take it up differently, and so there are some that are doing meetups on a regular basis for the parents to get together. They're studying, reading books together. They're doing some of those calls I mentioned together. Some of them are going out and doing experiences together, hiking, camping and things like that. My program, I am a one-woman show pretty much. I do everything except for I have what I call community partners, right? So as I mentioned, we go out in town, we learn from people. Some things we have set commitments to, like the CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu, and our chef that comes in. And we also run a Toastmasters for Teens program on Mondays. And so those are kind of like set things that we do. Otherwise, we do something last year. We haven't started it up again this year, but it was called Apogee Dad Afternoon. And we had every Friday, basically, I just booked a different dad to come in, and they would spend the afternoon with us being interviewed by the students, or kind of having a conversation, right? We kind of called it an interview, but first they open up and just tell us their story, like tell us who they are and where did you grow up and what was your life like, and then from there, just an organic conversation kind of unfolds. And I had roughly like a couple questions that we would ask everybody because we wanted to know like certain things, about them. But it was really just to get the conversation rolling and kind of break the ice a little bit and get the kids, you know what I mean? Just get everybody kind of into the flow of conversation. So that's one thing we've done, is just to build community, is to bring them into the classroom and just humanize them, right? And just, because I know sometimes it's, I mean, I've seen it even with my own kids, is like they get intimidated by each other's parents, and it's like, hey, we're all just here doing life, like we were kids once and we still mess up, we're still learning, and just to kind of humanize everything about us. So we like to do that. We've also invited the parents to come along. We've gotten the parents to jiu-jitsu with us and gotten them on the mats with the students. They loved that. The students they were like, I get to choke my dad, or my mom. That was really fun. And then the parents got to see their kids' skills, and see man, this is hard. Even just doing the warm-up, sometimes you're already sweating, doing the, you know what I mean? Getting ready for the mat work and rolling together and all of that. And so that was super fun. We have yet to bring them to CrossFit with us, but that's on the schedule for this year, is to get them in our CrossFit gym with us. And then, of course, our field trips. I post them out pretty early so parents know what we're doing, but also to let them know they can come. Parents are always welcome to come with us. And we did have a couple parents join us on our field trips last year. And so that's how I'm doing it. But there are, I think it's really brilliant, these schools that have younger kids that are doing those hiking trips together and those camping trips together, because their kids are just at a different phase of development and need community in a different way. And then for our teens, what I'm seeing is that they're really needing to have an identity of their own, of independence. And so I try to be kind of choosy in how I bring the parents in and invite them, because I can tell what the teens want is independence right now, and to be forming and shaping their own identity. And so I try to be a little more mindful of it. But anyway, I just love that about the Apogee community in general, is that they're always looking to the parents to say, hey, I know that you have an expertise in this. Can you come in and teach it? And it also shows, like, I've watched, so my husband is a veteran, but he's also just a really hands-on person who he had a dad who taught him how to like strip engines and rebuild them and all that kind of stuff, right? So he's just so competent with his hands. And I had him teach we did a self-reliance theme last year, and he came in and was teaching them car maintenance. And they literally like changed the brakes on our car. We have an all-wheel drive vehicle, so it was equal work, right? All four brakes are the same, which was brilliant. And he broke them up into teams and taught them that. And so what I love about that is that they're also seeing our parents as being the people who can give us knowledge as well, right? Instead of just like this opposition to freedom, right? Like, because sometimes I feel like that's what, I remember being a teen and being like, my parents are just in the way, of like me being free and like being able to do what I want. And so I'm trying to position it as like, look, your parents have knowledge that they can give to you, and they're a wealth of wisdom in certain areas. Like, we're not all equally wise in the same way. And so that's been helpful for me to tap into parents. And this year I had them do like a survey and to tell me how they would like to contribute. So that way I can look at that and curate a specific experience based on the thing that they say that they're good at.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's sort of like I was thinking, I was reading through your website today. I saw the jujitsu and CrossFit and whatever, and I was like, man, I want to go to this school. It sounds super fun. But it's cool because it seems like that opportunity is somewhat afforded to the parents, like in an appropriate way, that they get to participate in this. And learn from their kids, from other people's kids, but also teach them, because that's the appropriate way for, I think, relationships to always be, is sort of permeable both directions, and yeah, that's just really cool that you guys are doing that. And I think wise, because it's sort of, I think from the student's perspective, like you were just saying, they get to learn that their parents are a treasure trove of wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad, my dad would tell me that, like I've lived a lot more life than you. Like, just listen. He's trying to convince me that he knows what he's talking about. And I was much more like you, like, yeah, whatever, just let me do something that I want to do. And I think I missed the opportunity to idolize him and sort of emulate him, and I didn't have a desire to fulfill an imitative role of being a dad when I was growing up. Now I am a dad, and I uh I couldn't love it more. Like, I love that role. I love being like how my dad was for me, and I definitely get to see the way that, like, he was a kid and then became a dad. Like, I'm seeing all of that perspective now through hands-on experience. So it makes sense to me that that would even happen for the parents too, to be like, oh yeah, like, I'm pretty cool. I learned all this stuff, and I know how to take apart an engine, and that's really valuable. It was making me think of I have a friend a couple towns over here in New York, and he is like pretty much retirement age, but he just likes working, so he has a job doing construction, whatever. But on Friday nights, he hosts a group called Man Training, and invites fathers and sons and single guys and whatever, and they'll do sort of like service projects. So, like, sometimes it's at his barn to just like do car maintenance. Somebody needs an oil change. The only rule is you've got to change the oil. So, like, everybody gets to watch and participate and whatever. And so it's just all these sort of normal skills. I think you call it self-reliance. But they're normal to him, and so many people really just don't have that experience. So it's a cool bonding experience for that community because it's all local people, obviously getting there by car or whatever. And yeah, I like to think of the world as a place where you can actually like participate and do things. I think that's his ministry. That's the way that he
Mhm.
follows Jesus and introduces other people to Jesus. And it's not extremely like Bible analytical. It's not a Bible study. It's not spiritual per se, but it is deeply because he's equipping people to inhabit the world. And yeah, so I just think that's really important. Um, I could probably talk about education forever, but I wanted to ask you maybe to give us one story of somebody over the past 2 years that you've seen sort of unlocked. You said operating in the zone of genius when we were starting this. That's an epic phrase. And I don't know if you could think of any off the top of your head, just sort of like a Apogee Dripping Springs success story from the early process here.
Yeah, of a student. Are you talking
Yeah.
about a student? Yeah, absolutely. So I have two students really. One I mentioned one who came to us last year as a junior, and she had only ever been in public school, and she was kind of drowning in the drama, to be honest. And her parents were like, "We don't think she's actually even learning because she's so caught up in the drama and the social stuff," and so they were seeking something different, but she was too. Like it wasn't parent, and that's part of my program is that students have to apply. So parents can inquire with me and do a basic application so that we know we're on the same page. But then the teen actually fills out the more intensive application because they should be able to articulate themselves at this age. Who am I? How do I like to learn? All those things. I ask fun questions too, like, if you were famous and getting ready to walk on stage, what would be your walk-on song, But it just all gives me little clues about who they are and their personality. And so anyway, this family came and they were like, just ready. Just so they're like, we have to try something else. And so she's super quiet, so quiet. I mean, we do a family interview after so I get the applications in, I schedule a family interview so that I can actually ask them some questions in person and see how they do. And then we do a visit. So they'll come for 3 days and visit in our program. And I could see her striving just in those 3 days. She really wanted to figure this out, right? How to do learning differently. So we thought she was a good fit. The other students really liked her. Immediately we could all see that potential of like she could do really well here. So we invited her to join our program. It took about 4 weeks before she was really like making eye contact and speaking with confidence. And then about 6 weeks, her posture changed. A light was in her eyes that I had not seen before. And it was truly remarkable to watch this transition of this young person who had just been really labeled as sort of, having all these learning challenges, and also, like I said, socially things were not going well for her. And to be in this young and this small environment and to be truly seen for the first time, and to make real connections with her classmates, and something in her just totally blossomed and opened up. And by getting her on that stage, right, they have to perform to an extent, right? They have to get on that stage and show their work and talk. And she read the whole thing the first time. I mean, she was, it was clearly uncomfortable. It was not her favorite thing, but she did it anyway, right? So it was kind of like a crucible for her. And as my daughter will even say, that people really bond through they bond as a group by going through hard things together, but then it forges something in them of this inner dialogue of like, I'm capable. And so that's really what I saw blossoming in her. And now she's entering to her second year with us, and she's a real leader in our program now. Like, she will come to me and make comments about like, hey, this thing isn't, somebody wasn't honoring our class code. She'll even stand up to others and say, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that right now, or whatever. And it's not like in a weird like tattletale way. Because we talked about it, and she goes, I just genuinely care, about our class and our social agreement and who we are being here together. And so anyway, just to back up a little bit and tell you, so in her visit, we were just kicking off a new theme. and I took the kids to the library. So she was coming in as a junior, right? So keep that in mind, a junior in high school. She did not know how to look up a book in the card catalog. She didn't know how to, so I was like, oh, let me show you some keywords, okay, here's your call number, let's write this down. And I gave her a paper, I'm like, all right, go find it. And she kind of stood there and she's like, I don't know what to do. And I was like, all right, that's cool too. Like, let me just show you how the library works, right? But again, I was just shocked. I'm like, how does someone make it through to their junior year and they don't know how to navigate a library? To me, that is such a crime. Like, that's a disservice in such a profound way that you're prohibiting people from understanding how to lead themselves to knowledge. And that to me is not okay. And so now she's like always at the library. I mean, just to see her now, we were just talking the other day. I was like, hey, did you guys get some books? And she's like, oh yeah, I got to go return my books after, school. I've got some in my car that need to go back. And anyway, so now she enjoys this process of learning. She enjoys finding, books that are going to help her learning, and to see her on that stage. So let's go back to that first time, right? The end of the first 6-week session, her parents literally came to me at the end of that showcase, her dad crying. And he's like, we didn't even know she was capable of that. And so it's just something transformative is happening when you let these kids have more ownership, but also articulating their learning in a way that is not facts and names, right? Dates, names, whatever, right? It's something so different that they're engaging with here, and they're learning about themselves through that process of like, how do I like to learn, right? How do I like to consume information? And helping them realize, like, if you can lead yourself to knowledge, honestly, you can learn anything. And I've told them that, like, you just need a few basic skills and a pathway, and you can teach yourself anything. And at any point, you can decide, I want to learn something new, and you've already got a roadmap. You know how to do it. And then the other student that I have, he kind of had a mixed background of like public school and homeschool. And so when COVID happened, he was in middle school, and they decided to homeschool through that. And then at one point he was just feeling kind of isolated and lonely. And so when school was kicking back in, he thought, okay, maybe for 8th grade, I'll go back to public school. Went back in. He has ADHD, ADD kind of stuff. He gets distracted really easy, gets pulled off task really easy. And then also on top of that, gets overwhelmed easy by a lot of, by all those distractions, right? So a frenetic learning environment, a lot of expectations, a lot of things happening. And so they pulled him out again and decided to homeschool. But the problem is that for some parents, that feels overwhelming, right? That responsibility. And so for them, they're like, this is just not a good mix for us, because it also changes the dynamic of our relationship with our child in a way that's not really healthy, because we're having to like stay on top of him. And it just creates kind of, not a healthy relationship for us. And so they found my program, and the very first session, he was off task a lot. He wasn't getting his things delivered on time, but it took one time. And we got down to it. I mean, it was showcase day, right? So everybody's ready. Everybody's setting up their tables. Their slideshows are done. He's not done. And he's scrambling and he's panicking. But I let it you just have to let it happen. You know what I'm saying? And Matt Bodro would say this too, because I remember when I was getting up to that point of like getting to the showcase, and I remember talking with my cohort, right? And Matt's on the call with the affiliates, and I'm like, I really want this to be an amazing showcase. Like, I want it to be like, these kids are brilliant and, all this stuff. And he's like, hey, it's not you. Like, it's not your job, right? Like, it's their job to show their learning. And I'm like, I know, okay, So I have to unlearn some things too, right, in that process. Yeah. But I also know, I see him and I'm like, oh no, he's not done. He's not going to be ready. And it's like, I got to let it happen. Because in that, again, that was like his crucible. And he figured it out. And yes, he fumbled and he didn't deliver. And he was able to see himself in contrast to his counterparts there in the program, right? Like, oh shoot, they're ready. I'm not ready. We're a team. I'm letting them down. I'm letting myself down. And let me tell you what, he never let it happen again. So he went through that process. And he is the opposite of the other young lady who, he has an amazing stage presence. Like, he is a natural orator. He has a beautiful future in speaking. I am certain of it, because he's confident, but he's also he's got humor. He's got, like, he moves, he makes eye contact, like, he practices too, because it's really, really important to him that he does a good job. And so having that experience where he was, not only did he feel like he let his classmates down, right, because it's a production that they put on together, but he felt like he let himself down in his own personal expectations. And so here we go into the second 6 weeks, and we're getting near a showcase. He was done 2 weeks early. And he was literally coming down to the wire of watching others not be done, and he was offering to help them. Because
Wow.
and at one point he's like walking around the room and he's like, wow, I don't have anything to do. I'm done, And this sense of, like, pride for him, because he just turned it around so profoundly. But again, you have to give them a space, because if you're, as a parent or as an educator, and you're micromanaging them, and you're like a little herding dog nipping at everyone's heels, number one, no one likes that. That's just not fun. No one enjoys that, and it doesn't set you up for a good relationship with your students. But also, it neuters them of the opportunity to self-correct, and that's what they need opportunity for, and that can only come through true quote unquote failure, right? So failure looks different depending on what the consequences are, what the stakes are. But that's what he experienced. He experienced a personal failure, and then he made a commitment to himself: I will never let that happen again. And and now it's funny, because he actually uses that as a tool for teaching other students when they enter into our program new. He's like, oh, let me tell you what I did, and he totally owns it, but because it's a teaching story for him now, to help others not do the same thing.
Yeah. Wow. That is really powerful, especially in a world where I don't know if he's taking any medication, but like that is certainly a medical issue in our society. For most people, oh, what pill do we need to get you on so that you could do better at this school thing that clearly doesn't matter to him, right? Like that was the issue in the beginning. He didn't think it mattered, and then all of a sudden it mattered. But coming from an environment where just every day is a lot of stuff that's like, I don't know, does it matter? Does it not matter? And he's suffering the anxiety of, like, working through all that. But yeah, it's really cool. I think that you're doing a great job, Sarah, of giving these kids and parents an approach to life that signifies the meaning of it. Like I had a quote to get to. I'll read it now just because I think it touches on this. But it's from John Taylor Gatto in Dumbing Us Down. He says, meaning, not disconnected facts, is what human beings seek. And education is a set of codes for processing raw data into meaning. I know from other interviews I've seen of Apogee leaders that they refer to the students as heroes. I think that's really cool. And it's like it's a great way of placing each student in a narrative. And narrative is where you find meaning. It's where you find that ability to process raw data. Because if you have a goal or an objective, then all of a sudden an object could become a tool or an obstacle. But if you don't have any meaning, then it's just an object, and you've got no direction, and you're not going anywhere. So I just think that I am proud of you, proud to get to meet you, and thankful that people are waking up, at least in Dripping Springs and other places around the country, to build contributing members of society.
Yeah, thank you so much for being curious and leaning in and asking good questions about this, because we really do need more people to realize that they can do this. I had an interview or a conversation with a woman, even at my church, who has young children, and I was trying to promote this idea of homeschool for her. And there's a book I wanted to mention. You kind of touched on it. You kind of said this phrase when you're talking about people teaching their children and having young children. And it's a book called "You Are Your Child's First Teacher." And I learned about it through the Waldorf program, because they believe that kids should stay at home until first grade, that they are learning everything they need to know about being, a good human and being a well-rounded person by observing life, right? Observing their parents, we are modeling things constantly to our children. And there's a phrase that I learned from my old boss, that he says, more is caught than taught. And anyway, so I was talking with this woman, and I'm like, you should just homeschool if you're feeling like you're not finding a program that's right, and whatever. And she's, oh no, I have no degrees, I have no certifications, and I'm like, you don't need it. Like, we have all been brainwashed to think that somehow because this person went through a 4-year degree program in this college, that somehow now they are imbued with this stuff that we don't have to teach our children a thing. And then the truth is that, like I said, if you understand how to break things down and move through things incrementally and look at it in a multifaceted way, you can learn anything. And also what I'm finding is that I was shocked because last year when we went into the Middle Ages, I thought, I don't know how much kids are going to like history, right? They loved it the way that we learned it. And they were like, can we please do it again? Like, we're only revisiting this session, but through a different, kind of through a different viewpoint, because they had so much fun with it that they wanted to do it again. And they love history. And I was like shocked, but it was because we approach it in a different way. And we give it life, right? So it has a lot of richness to it and relevance, right? How does this, and that just goes back to me as a learner why am I learning this? How will I ever use it? And that is the basis. When I start to look at like, how am I going to construct this theme and like put things together and weave this whole thing together for them and kind of breadcrumb it along for them to be finding their way, is that ultimately I want them to see through the way that we're learning it, how it applies to life and why it's relevant, why it matters. And so anyway, I so appreciate people like you who are, having the time, spending the time to have these conversations and then to share it out is so important, because I want people to just know that they are very capable. Everyone is capable of taking this up and doing this. We have people in Apogee who some people they actually decided because they could, they're a doer, right? They're a doer, and they were like, I'm going to start a school, but they're the owner, but they're not teaching. They found people who wanted to join the mission. And so we have people who literally just, basically they signed the lease, they're making all the investments, but they're finding people who are passionate about this and who want to be in classrooms, and they kept their day job, right? So the Apogee affiliate is like the owner, but they're finding operators, I guess, if we use that term, and from the business world, right? And so you don't have to do everything like I am. I just happen to have a set of skills and passion that puts me in the classroom because I want to be in the classroom. But the truth is that there are many ways to approach this. And, I'm subleasing space in a church. I'm renting, it's almost 1,000 square foot. I've got a great relationship with the church. We actually have had the youth pastor come in and work with our students. We've had the church administration has come in and like observed their practice presentations and given them feedback. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful relationship. And so it doesn't have to be really complicated at first to get going. We have people in Apogee who have they literally just purchased a bigger house and put a portion of their home is now their school. Literally a single mom. Yeah. Who her parents helped her, and she got a really nice property, and so the school, like one whole section of her house is the school, and her and her son, live in a different portion of the house, and so she's making it work, right? And so I just want to put it out there, like I know that there's complications with like codes and permitting, and every city or county is a little different, but I truly believe micro schooling is catching on. And it is like wildfire moving through the United States. There are hundreds of micro schools that are opening up now because people are really seeing that what I believe is that the future of education is hyper local and it's hyper human. And that is really how we affect changes. We just focus on solving a problem for our own community, and everything else will find its way, right? If we just focus on our most local need, and that's what I saw here. Not only was I solving a problem for my own personal family because I could not find a high school I wanted to, as I say, sacrifice my child to, right? Like, and I thought I can't be alone. And the truth is I'm not. So I started with 3. I'll share this last little bit. As I started with 3 kids. And by doing those showcases and inviting people in, so we were showing our work to the community, right? And inviting people in and making partnerships all throughout the community. I got nominated for the Up and Coming Business of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce here in my town within my first year, which is like unheard of. and I didn't win. A bar beat me, but I think they had more people voting for them.
Yeah, that's also the future of America. So it's competing, but yeah.
So anyway, but I was making an impact already immediately because I was engaging our community. People were like, "Hey, what is she doing?" Right? She's engaging the community in this way that we've never seen before. And then the other thing is that, solving this problem for your local community. I looked around and I said genuine, because I had a lot of people who were like, are you going to open a middle school? Are you going to like build backwards? And number one, middle school is like a whole nother challenge just because developmentally of what children are going through. It's a very, very challenging time in their life. And so I really had to ask myself, do I really want to do that? Because that's actually not the problem I'm trying to solve here for myself. But then I looked around and I said, you know what? Legitimately, there are so many good K through 8 programs here. No, I don't want to do that. I think they're doing a great job. And I have a younger child who is in a K through 8 here, and we are very happy. And so I just thought, I am filling a need. Like, there are no real alternative high school opportunities here. And so I thought, no, I'm going to stick with my passion and where I see the need. And now I am waitlisted. I'm waitlisted in my part-time program. I'm waitlisted in my Toastmasters program, which is really just like an enrichment for homeschoolers. And I'm waitlisted in my full-time program. And I was able to, raise my tuition, and no one even batted an eye because they see it as worthy of that price. And so if I could encourage other people to just really consider, this idea that this is also just a chapter of your life too. I look at this and go, okay, like I'm 43, and I'm loving this and I'm having so much fun working with these young people, and I can still go on and do other things later in my life, right? Like it's there's more, like there's so much more to this.
Yeah. I really appreciate that approach to like solving your own problem. That's good business advice, but also just like having a sense that you can do something about the problem that you're experiencing, I think is so crucial to sanity. But then even as you're experiencing, it's crucial to community. Like that is the thing that you offer to your community because it's the thing that bothered you and the thing that you took time to solve. And so as far as being a contributing member of your community, I think that's sort of like, that's a natural progression. You go from, having an observation to a solution to a product. And then once you have that product, then there's some sort of like relationship that builds from that point forward with the people around you. So that's really cool, a good attitude to have. And I totally agree with you about the future of American education. It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me that the business future of our country would be, hyper local, hyper individual, and that the school wouldn't follow that pattern. Like it's just sort of supply and demand. Like I was thinking of public schools that are sort of like the post office, like they might serve one specific purpose and it's to send bills to people that you throw away. But like other than that, you don't use the post office for shipping because there's other competing businesses that outdo them. And so I think to the extent that we can, it's important to get people that will be passionate about this to get over that hump and just be confident enough to give it a shot and outcompete, because I know there's lots of regulations and whatever, and people are nervous, and there's definitely a lot of brainwashing, just ideology that people have been entrained with. But there's definitely an opportunity, and people just waking up on lots of different issues. So to take a positive spin on the post-COVID world, I would say that was scary, but I think a lot of people got scared and are changing, what they think is acceptable. So yeah, thanks for being a part of that. Is there anywhere that you want to direct people from this? Just give you the opportunity to, say a link or a book, or can they donate to help you? Can they look into a resource to start something in their area? Whatever you got.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just make all the points there that you hit on. So if they want to connect with me, it's apogeedrippingsprings.com. It's my website. We are on Instagram and we're on Facebook. I'm definitely more active on Facebook when I post follow-ups of things that we've done, field trips that we're doing, events that we're hosting. But eventually I try to trickle it out everywhere. If they want to look into Apogee itself, apogeestrong.com is a really great resource for the education opportunities and for the mentorship groups for the men's, women's, and teen groups. And yeah, I just would encourage anybody to just take a look at this and see if it's right for them.